Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're diving into something, well, it's practically woven into our lives at this point, social media and its impact on mental health,
It's such a relevant topic.
isn't it? Whether you're here to maybe prep for a discussion, catch up on the latest research, or just kind of curious about how these platforms shape our well-being, we've got a really fascinating source for you today.
Oh, this should be good.
It is. It's a proposed podcast script that explores both I guess you could say, the sunshine and shadows of social media.
I like that.
Right. It even offers some tips for navigating this complex world.
Can't wait to dig in.
Me too.
Mm.
I think a natural starting point is, what draws people to these platforms in the first place. I mean, connection, right? That ability to stay in touch with family and friends, no matter the distance, sharing life's moments in real time.
It's pretty remarkable when you think about it.
It is. I mean, for me, it's been a game changer for staying close with loved ones who've moved away.
Absolutely. And, beyond those personal connections, you've got platforms like LinkedIn that have completely transformed professional networking.
Oh, for sure.
Finding mentors, discovering job opportunities, connecting with colleagues across the globe.
It's a level of access we've never had before.
Right.
I've even heard stories of people finding entire new career paths through connections they made on LinkedIn.
It's true. It happens all the time.
And then, of course, there's the whole world of learning and entertainment that's opened up.
Oh, absolutely.
YouTube tutorials alone.
Yeah.
I mean, they've helped me with everything from like fixing a leaky faucet to learning a new recipe.
Oh, I love those.
Right. And then platforms like Instagram and TikTok. It's like this constant stream of inspiration and entertainment and even education.
It's mind-blowing when you consider how these platforms have basically democratized access to knowledge and entertainment,
Totally.
and that accessibility even extends to mental health support.
Really?
Yeah. So many people find comfort and connection in these online communities, sharing experiences and finding support among people who really understand their challenges.
That's amazing.
It can be incredibly powerful, especially for those who might feel isolated or lack access to those more traditional forms of support.
That actually reminds me of a friend who found an online support group after experiencing a loss. And she said it was a lifesaver to connect with others who'd been through something similar.
That sense of belonging is so crucial for mental well-being.
Absolutely.
And it's something that social media, when used intentionally, can really help foster.
I like that when used intentionally.
Real.
Because, of course, there's always another side to the story, right?
Yeah.
You can't talk about social media without acknowledging the potential downsides.
The shadows lurking behind the bright facade, so to speak.
Exactly. And one that comes to mind immediately is, well, the culture of comparison.
Oh, that's a big one.
I think we've all fallen victim to that at some point, right? You're scrolling through your feed and you're bombarded with these like perfectly curated lives, vacations, achievements, even those flawless selfies.
It's easy to get caught up in it.
It is.
Yeah.
It's like we forget that what we're seeing is just a highlight reel.
Exactly. We're constantly bombarded with these idealized versions of reality, and it's hard not to, compare ourselves and come up short.
The University of Pennsylvania actually did a study on this and found that increased Facebook use was linked to both decreased well-being and increased envy.
Wow, that's really interesting.
Isn't it?
It's a good reminder that our online experiences can have a very real impact on our mental state.
It makes you wonder, are we really connecting? Or are we just comparing and competing?
That's a good question.
And then there's the elephant in the room, social media addiction.
Yeah.
Have you ever found yourself mindlessly scrolling, like losing track of time and neglecting things that are important to you?
Oh, I've definitely been there.
It's kind of frightening how easy it is to get sucked in, isn't it?
It is. And there's a reason for that.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. These platforms, they're designed to keep us engaged,
Yeah.
They use all these sophisticated algorithms and notifications that basically tap into our brain's reward system.
Like they know us better than we know ourselves sometimes.
Sometimes it feels that way, but the good news is we don't have to be passive participants in this, this digital dance.
Oh, I like that digital dance.
Right. There are strategies we can use to develop a healthier and more balanced relationship with social media.
Okay, I'm all for that reclaiming control.
Absolutely. But before we dive into those strategies, I'm curious, we've talked about connection and comparison, but what about the information overload?
Oh, that's a good one.
Right. It feels like there's this constant stream of news and opinions and updates flying at us from all directions.
It's overwhelming. It really is.
It is.
It can make you feel so disconnected from reality.
It's like, what do you even trust anymore? What do you ignore? How do you even begin to process it all?
It's a real challenge, and one that I'm sure we'll explore further when we dive into those practical tips for managing our social media use.
Absolutely. But before we do that, I'm curious, have you found any strategies that help you personally navigate this, this influx of information?
I have, actually.
Oh, I'd love to hear them.
Well, I've definitely had to implement some boundaries to protect my own, mental well-being.
That makes sense.
One thing that's been helpful is, well, being very intentional about the sources I follow.
I love that. It's all about curating your online experience to be more aligned with your values and interests.
Exactly.
And maybe even more importantly, prioritizing your mental health in the process.
That's such a crucial point.
It is.
We often talk about the negative impacts of social media, but we rarely acknowledge the responsibility we have to protect ourselves in these digital spaces.
It's like we just hand over our mental health to the algorithms without even realizing it.
It's true.
It's time we reclaim that control.
I agree.
Set boundaries and prioritize our well-being.
It's a good reminder.
I think that's the perfect segue into the next part of our dive, where we'll explore some practical tips and strategies for doing just that.
Okay, I'm ready.
Let's dive in. All right, so let's get into some of those practical tips from our source material for, building a healthier relationship with social media.
I'm ready. Sometimes the simplest solutions are the most effective, right?
I think so, yeah. A lot of it just comes down to awareness.
Okay.
We often underestimate just how much time we're spending scrolling, so a good starting point is actually tracking your usage.
Oh, that's a good idea.
Right. There are apps for that, like Screen Time, which can give you a clear picture of where your time's going.
I like that. You can't manage what you don't measure, as they say.
Exactly. Another tip, and I find this one really helpful, is being really intentional about what you allow into your feed. Unfollow accounts that trigger negative emotions, whether it's envy or comparison, anything that makes you feel bad about yourself.
It's like we're almost punishing ourselves with those idealized versions of reality, right?
It is a form of self-sabotage, and it's something we need to be more mindful of.
I agree. So unfollow those accounts.
Yeah. And instead, consciously choose to follow accounts that inspire you, educate you, make you laugh, You're creating a more positive and supportive online environment for yourself that way.
It's like spring cleaning for your mental health. Out with the negativity, in with the good vibes.
Exactly.
But what about those times when, even the most curated feed can't combat that feeling of digital overwhelm? You know what I mean?
Oh, absolutely. I think that's when it's crucial to remember that there's a whole world offline waiting to be explored.
Right, like a digital detox.
Exactly. Step away from the screens, reconnect with the tangible world around you.
Okay, so what are some ways people can actually put that into practice?
It can be as simple as, replacing some of your usual screen time with activities you enjoy offline, right? Instead of endlessly scrolling, pick up that book you've been meaning to read. Go for a walk in nature, meet up with a friend for coffee, work on a hobby.
It's amazing how refreshing it is to shift your focus, even for a little bit.
I know.
It really highlights that it's all about balance,
Yeah.
right? Finding that sweet spot where social media enhances our lives without dominating them.
You hit the nail on the head. It's not about demonizing social media altogether. It's about using it consciously and intentionally in a way that aligns with our values, supports our well-being.
Like with so many things in life, moderation is key.
Right. A little bit of social media can be fun. It can be connecting.
Yeah.
But too much can tip the scales and have a negative impact on our mental health. So it's about finding that equilibrium.
Makes sense.
And the beauty is you don't have to overhaul your whole digital life overnight, right? Even small changes can make a big difference.
Like what?
Well, maybe you start with setting a time limit for certain apps. Or choose one day a week to completely disconnect, whatever works for you.
So it's really about finding what works for you and making those gradual changes.
Exactly. It's a journey, not a destination.
I like that. A journey.
And like any journey, there will be bumps along the way, right? The key is to be kind to yourself, acknowledge your struggles, and just keep moving forward in a way that feels good for you.
Love that perspective. So as we kind of wrap up this part of our deep dive, what are some key takeaways you're hoping listeners will carry with them?
Well, I think the most important takeaway is that social media has this dual nature.
Okay.
It can be an incredible tool for connection, for support, for learning, even activism.
For sure.
But it can also fuel comparison, anxiety, even those addictive behaviors. So it's really crucial to be aware of both sides of the coin.
being mindful of how it's impacting us,
Yeah.
setting those boundaries, taking steps to, mitigate the risks while still enjoying the benefits.
Exactly. And at the end of the day, I hope listeners will remember that social media is just one small part of their lives.
It shouldn't define us.
No, it shouldn't define us, consume us, or dictate our worth.
Right. Our value comes from who we are as individuals, not the number of likes or followers we have.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Well, before we move on to the final part of our deep dive, I want to leave our listeners with a question to ponder, something that builds on everything we've discussed so far.
Ooh, I like where this is going. What's the question?
How can we harness the power of social media for good? To connect, to inspire, to create positive change, while also minimizing its potential for harm. It's a question that challenges us to, think critically about our own digital habits and consider how we can use these platforms more intentionally and ethically. Welcome back to the Deep Dive. As we wrap up, let's revisit that question we left you with. How can we make social media a force for good while, minimizing that potential for harm?
It's a challenge for sure.
It is.
But it's one I think we need to be talking about more, both individually and as a society.
Right, because it's so easy to get caught up in those negative aspects of social media. But we have to remember there's good that can come from it too.
Absolutely. We've seen how it can connect people, build support networks, spread awareness about important issues.
Even spark movements for social change.
Exactly. Think about the role social media played in amplifying voices and mobilizing communities during recent social justice movements.
Oh, that's a great point.
It provided a platform for sharing information, organizing events, and building solidarity in ways that just weren't possible before.
So it can be a real force for positive change when it's used with, with intention and ethically.
Right.
But how do we strike that balance? How do we harness that power while also protecting ourselves and promoting that responsible online engagement?
Well, it starts with each of us, right? It starts with individual awareness and action.
Okay.
We each have a responsibility to look at our own social media habits, be mindful of the content we're consuming and creating, and set boundaries that protect our mental well-being.
Boundaries like being selective about who we follow, prioritizing quality over quantity, and, unfollowing those accounts that trigger those negative feelings or make us feel inadequate or envious.
Exactly. It's also about being mindful of the time we spend online, right? Making sure we're setting limits so we can engage in activities that nourish our well-being offline, whether that's spending time in nature, connecting with loved ones, pursuing hobbies, or just disconnecting and recharging.
It's so easy to get caught in that endless scroll and
Yeah.
feel like we need to be constantly connected. But sometimes disconnecting is actually the best thing we can do for ourselves.
I completely agree. It's an act of self-care.
It is.
And beyond those individual actions, I think it's important that we start having larger conversations about social media ethics.
Oh, for sure.
Data privacy, the role of technology in our lives.
It's about holding these companies accountable.
Exactly. Holding them accountable for creating platforms that prioritize well-being, foster healthy online communities, and, combat things like misinformation and harmful content.
So it's not just about our individual choices. It's about advocating for a digital world that really reflects our values.
Right. Exactly.
Well, as we wrap up this deep dive on social media and mental health, I hope you're leaving with, a sense of empowerment when it comes to your own relationship with these platforms.
I hope so too, because you do have the power to choose how you engage, to curate your online experience, and to advocate for a digital world that, supports well-being and connection and positive change.
So true. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. I hope you found it insightful and maybe even a little inspiring.
Me too. Until next time, be well, stay curious, and remember to be kind to yourselves and each other, both on and offline.